Section 8. A personal summary. The cosmic chessboard is set, with all its pieces strategically arranged. It is within this framework that I now endeavor to synthesize the material we have reviewed into what I hope will be a coherent and compelling narrative. Throughout our exploration, we have emphasized the importance of narratives in shaping human understanding. With this in mind, I propose that the most prudent approach to engaging with the Bible, particularly in light of its complexities, is to begin where the text itself begins, at the very outset. This approach is not merely a matter of chronological order, but one of respecting the narrative flow, which, in my view, is the most edifying and widely supported by biblical scholars. For instance, when examining the concept of Satan, I initially turned to the book of Revelation, which purports to detail both his origin and ultimate destiny. However, starting at the conclusion and assuming an immediate understanding of the characters, motivations, and symbols is inherently flawed. This is akin to watching only the final act of a play and assuming one fully comprehends the entire plot. Such an approach does not allow for a proper understanding of a coherent story, yet this is how many approach the Bible. The New Testament, constituting a mere 23% of the Bible's total content, often receives emphasis, leaving the foundational context of the Old Testament largely overlooked. Granted, the Bible is not a singular book, but a collection, a library that spans vast stretches of time. Thus, the notion of reading it, in order, can be debated. Nevertheless, I suggest that by following the narrative from its beginning, tracing how it unfolds, and observing how it reveals deeper truths about spiritual beings, we place ourselves in a much better position to appreciate its overarching message. As the saying goes, the beginning is a very good place to start. The Bible opens with the book of Genesis, where God is depicted as hovering over the deep, tahom in Hebrew, a term some scholars associate with the primordial chaos serpent, Tiamat. This initial portrayal sets the stage for a fundamental dynamic. God, the foundation of all reality, hovers over untapped potential, a formless void of chaos, and from it brings forth order. The symbolism of deep waters, often linked to chaos or serpentine imagery, recurs throughout Scripture and serves as a critical interpretive thread. This motif emerges well before we even reach the conclusion of Genesis' first chapter. Initially, I approached the connection between Tahom and Tiamat with caution. While Tiamat provides fitting imagery, conflating the two seemed speculative. However, further investigation offered clarification. Other scriptural references, such as Psalm chapter 74 verses 13 to 14 and Isaiah chapter 27 verse 1, unmistakably invoke serpent or dragon imagery, suggesting that the biblical authors themselves employed these motifs intentionally, rather than them being mere linguistic coincidences introduced by later translators. Following the separation of the waters, a metaphorical slaying of the Leviathan, order begins to emerge. Among the creations is humanity, a special being imbued with the breath and spirit of God. Humanity is thus endowed with free will and consciousness, unique gifts among creations. Yet, as the narrative progresses, we witness humanity's fall. Presented with propositional knowledge of good and evil, humanity is warned to avoid the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. However, chaos, again symbolized by a serpent, reappears at the tree. Some may hesitate to reduce the serpent to merely a symbol of chaos, instead interpreting it as a literal snake or even Satan in snake form. I take no issue with such hesitation, for even if one approaches the text literally, the serpent still represents chaos invading an ordered garden, functioning as an adversarial force. Whether one views the serpent purely symbolically, as representing the internal struggle of Adam and Eve, or as an external force prompting their rebellion, the interpretation remains sound. Ultimately, this depends on whether one believes people create ideas or that ideas possess people. The question remains, why is this chaotic serpent present in the first place? The answer lies in the necessity of free will. To truly choose the highest ideal, one must possess the capacity to choose its opposite. However, it is essential to recognize that not all chaos is evil, just as not all order is good. In this case, the serpent embodies rebellion against the highest good, and thus represents evil. Curiously, the serpent does not explicitly lie during its exchange with Eve. It claims that she and Adam will not die and that they will become like God, knowing good and evil. Technically, these statements are true, but only in part. Adam and Eve do not die immediately, and they do gain experiential knowledge of good and evil. Nevertheless, God's warning holds true. They do die, though in a broader sense encompassing mortality and separation from divine presence. This demonstrates the serpent's cunning in using half-truths to obscure the full reality. To better understand this dynamic, consider the tale of the sword of Damocles from ancient Greek lore, popularized by Cicero. Damocles, envious of the luxury and power of King Dionysius, is allowed to sit on the throne. However, a razor-sharp sword, suspended by a single horsehair, hangs above his head, symbolizing the unseen dangers accompanying power. Though Dionysius did not lie about granting luxury, the experience was far from what Damocles anticipated. Similarly, Adam and Eve, misled by the serpent's half-truths, could not foresee the full consequences of their decision. In their rebellion, Adam and Eve attempt to define morality on their own terms, a venture doomed to fail. As finite beings, their understanding of ultimate reality is necessarily limited. Reality, by its very nature, exists independently of human perceptions or ideas. It is the bedrock upon which all thought is grounded. Human cognition can only approximate reality, never fully encapsulate it. Adam and Eve, deceived by the serpent's sophistry, believed they could transcend this limitation, but ultimately discovered they were tragically mistaken. As the narrative continues, humanity is exiled from God's direct presence, given over to pursue their flawed self-definition. The next significant encounter with spiritual beings arises in the Abrahamic narratives, where angels, divine messengers, appear. As we have discussed, angels serve as extensions of God's will, so much so that the line between the messenger and the message often blurs. Another pivotal spiritual figure emerges in the book of Job, Satan, the adversary. Though Job is part of the Ketuvim, writings, which appear after the Torah in the biblical canon, its events are often placed within the time frame of the Genesis patriarchs. Elihu, one of Job's debaters, is identified as a descendant of Buz, a relative of Abraham. Some scholars even locate Uz, the land of Job, in Edom, suggesting a period after the birth of Jacob and Esau. Regardless, Job's narrative fits within the broader Genesis chronology. In Job, Satan functions as an adversarial figure, permitted by God to test Job. This figure differs significantly from the later Western notion of Satan as a singular fallen angel. As we have examined, the evolution of this concept owes much to the writings of the Second Temple period, intertestamental literature, and early church teachings. Figures such as Samyaza, Azazel, and Mastema more closely resemble the Western image of Satan than the Satan of Job. One may ask, then, why the fallen angel narrative has persisted despite its limited biblical support. Here, I propose an unconventional yet plausible perspective. The narrative of Satan's fall mirrors humanity's fall. In fact, If we substitute Adam and Eve for Satan, we witness a cosmic retelling of the same story. Adam and Eve, in many respects, function as angelic figures. They were created to reflect God's will and act as His representatives. Their rebellion mirrors the supposed rebellion of Satan. Cain, their son, continues this rebellion, much as apocryphal accounts depict fallen angels leading others astray. Cain's descendants wage war against God's purposes, culminating in the flood. The Book of Enoch suggests that the spirits of the Nephilim, the offspring of these rebellious beings, endure as demons. Metaphorically, this resonates. Although the wicked may perish, their ideologies and influences persist, possessing subsequent generations. Isaiah 44 portrays demons as non-gods, human ideals that have been idolized and worshipped. This aligns with the Western portrayal of Satan as the leader of demons. Viewed this way, Satan becomes the cosmic embodiment of humanity's rebellion. Humanity, in rejecting divine order, creates and sustains its own demons, unclean spirits or corrupt ideologies. The story of humanity's fall predates the narrative of Satan. Therefore, it seems more plausible that humanity's rebellion inspired the satanic fall narrative, rather than the reverse. The Western portrayal of the Antichrist, too, is a composite figure drawn from the tyrannical traits observed throughout history, including those depicted in the Bible, starting with the Nephilim and the mighty kings of old. What I seek to convey is that while these narratives possess mystical and apocryphal roots, they reflect deep truths about human nature and rebellion. I understand that some may wish to incorporate elements from works like the Book of Enoch or Jubilees into their interpretation of Scripture. However, I caution against this unless these elements are treated primarily for their symbolic value as understood by ancient peoples. Those who adopt a rigidly literal approach should be wary of externalizing the origin of sin in a way that diminishes human responsibility, while those inclined toward an overly figurative interpretation must avoid underestimating the real forces, ideas, ideologies, and influences that can shape or even possess individuals. These forces cannot simply be reasoned away.